and welcome to Disrupt TV. My name is Vala Afshar, Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce, and your co-host for the next hour. Please follow us on Twitter at DisrupTV Show. Send Ray, myself, and our distinguished guest your questions using hashtag DisrupTV. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host. He's the CEO and founder of Constellation Research, best-selling author of Disrupting Digital Business, regular contributor to Harvard Business Review, ZDNet, and many other publications. And in my humble opinion, one of the top futurists to follow on Twitter at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray Wang from Davos.
Thanks a lot. I'm here with my awesome co-host as well, Vala Afshar, and he's one of the top followers on Twitter for CIOs and CMOs, and more importantly, he's an author himself. You gotta check out his book, and more importantly, we are live here from Davos, and who are we here with?
It is our pleasure to introduce David Kirkpatrick, founder, editor-in-chief of Techonomy. As the founder of Techonomy, David is a journalist, commentator about technology, and author of the best-selling book, The Facebook Effect, the inside story of the company that's connecting the world. This is published in 32 countries. You can follow David on Twitter at DavidKirkpatrick. Welcome, David, from Davos to Disrupt TV.
The reason I didn't have my last letter in my last name was at the time I joined Twitter, you couldn't even use that many characters.
He's an early adopter.
I was early, yeah. I don't use it that much, but I was early.
Well, this is awesome. We're live here at the Wipro Pavilion, which is Promenade 74. Come by, check it out. This year's Davos is a little bit different. So what do you see? What are some of the trends that have changed?
Well, they're always different. What do you think is so different this year?
I think we got a little bit of this gloom on globalization and debt crisis, but what do you see?
Okay, well, clearly there's gloom on globalization and debt, but I would say there's also gloom about technology because there's a feeling that the data problem is out of control and we don't really have a solution for it. So this is my world, this idea of especially Facebook-related problems, and that I unfortunately, for better or for worse, I'm sort of a magnet for opinions about Facebook, both having them and receiving them. So I hear people talk about it all the time and nobody says anything good about it. I just came from DLD, which is a great tech conference in Munich. Sheryl Sandberg spoke there to universal, really disapproval, I would say.
Yeah, pretty much.
She got the most tepid applause. Were you there too?
I heard about
it was very tepid, and she really didn't, I don't think, sway anyone. It was a very slick, very glib, unfortunately, presentation. But I think similarly here at Davos, there are so many tech people. I mean, one thing that's changed at Davos in recent, maybe the last decade, since I've been coming here many, many years, is my 22nd Davos, but in the last decade, it has become totally suffused with technology. This is a community of technologists as well as global leaders. It's swarming with people from tech. I mean, blockchain people are here in too many numbers, but I was at a dinner last night and I would say a lot of the people there were truly distressed about the prospect of the failure of our ability to govern the net giants generally, and this fear that with Facebook, with Alexa, with a lot of other things that are happening now, and the looming Internet of Things on 5G, that we're really at risk of losing control of our data almost entirely, and nobody really knows what to do about it. That's a big topic here.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing a tech clash, so go ahead, Vala.
Yeah, I'm just going back to DLD, having Professor Scott Galloway follow anybody from Facebook makes it a little bit more uncomfortable because of his predictions and his very targeted discussions.
American stance is amazing.
Yeah, right. So in this new economic era, globalization 4.0, which is the theme, we've had World Economic Forum talk about that this is not a zero-sum game. So it's not a matter of free trade or protectionism. It's not technology or jobs. It's not immigration or protecting citizen or growth versus equality. Do you get a sense based on this explosive, what Crawford Del Prete, the new president of IDC, noted, multiplied innovation, where you have cloud and mobile and social and mixed reality, artificial intelligence, blockchain, 3D printing, so on and so forth. Companies are now gravitating more from experimentation phase to actual implementation and adoption. And with that, you have this important element of your core values. And if trust is not your number one core value, it's very difficult to compete in this hyper-connected knowledge-sharing economy. Do you see trust as a core theme of some of the sessions that you've been a part of at Davos?
Well, trust is a core theme of all discussions about business right now and tech. And one of the annual big things that happens at Davos is the unveiling of the Edelman Trust Barometer, which came out this morning, actually. And what it discovered was I'd say, even greater concern among citizens around the world about inequality of all sorts. But it also found a weird and somewhat encouraging thing, depending on your perspective, which is that citizens in almost every country are increasingly looking to business for leadership on the issues of our time, on the social, the ethical, the political, the economic, for societal success, that people are hoping that companies will take the lead because they're so distressed that governments are failing to do so. So I think that's a big deal. But, you know, I think the question you asked was quite well articulated in its scope. The reality is we are at a moment when so many things are happening at once in the technology realm. And let's face it, the economy is still powering forward. So we're still basically in good times. But I think despite the good times economically, many, many people have tremendous concerns about how all these technology trends are going to coalesce into a future world that will be safe and happy for all of us. And the issue of data, the issue of security, privacy, and jobs, these are gigantic concerns. And the jobs concern, by the way, also looms very large in the Edelman research. So, you know, nobody's content at the moment. I think those of us who are in tech, like those of us on this podcast or whatever you call it, are truly believers in the potential of tech to keep making the world better. And probably we're all certain in some way or another that's going to be the case. But the world is scared.
Yeah, and the other thing that's kind of growing here is the fact that people feel that it's a winner takes all market, and in many cases there's no level playing field, right? You don't even have a shot before it takes off, and part of it's because investors have actually reduced the risk in terms of the investments that are going on. By reducing the risk, they reduce the competition, and therefore people feel like they don't have a fair shot at anything, and that's part of the anxiety that people are feeling in that market.
And of course, on top of that, you have Oxfam just published a report that 26 of the richest people on earth have the same wealth of the 50% of humanity, 3.8 billion people. And you have speakers at the conference, Dr. Kai-Fu Lee, who just published AI Superpowers, and his belief is in the next 10 years, 40% of jobs are susceptible to automation. World Economic Forum has published reports that by 2025, 50% of skills today can be completely automated. Who is talking about, and what are some of the solutions that you've seen proposed in terms of this digital divide that continues to widen? And I haven't read or through research found any real silver bullet in terms of any of these big topics that we're talking about.
Well, there is no silver bullet, but everyone agrees, especially in the developed countries, we need a radical increase in training and reskilling education. The companies need to be doing it, governments need to be supporting it. It needs to be a policy priority of significantly greater proportions than it is today. And that the failure to do that is one of the reasons we're seeing Brexit, the election of Trump, the Yellow Vest movement, et cetera, et cetera. People are scared. And that, you know, I've been somewhat wondering how much automation really is behind a lot of that stuff. But the Edelman research today actually suggests that it's a significant factor.
Yeah, and then the other factors behind it is the fact that in some places we are going to need that automation. Think about Europe with the declining population rate. Think about Japan with the declining population rate. Think about China in 20 years with this declining population rate. The automation's got to come, but for other countries like the US, where we're still growing on population, that can become an issue, even though we've got a scarce skills issue right now.
Yeah, and it's encouraging to see countries like India. Every second, 3 new people in India connect to the internet for the first time. The projections are by 2030, 1 billion active internet users, which will create an economy where India is projected to surpass US by 2030, only behind China. Do you see a lot of representation from, I wouldn't say developing countries, but countries that are demonstrating great GDP growth and great adoption of technology and becoming potentially real strong influences in terms of shaping global economy?
Well, I mean, there's no question that the digitization of the economies of the developing countries is proving to be a gigantic boon for them. I mean, I think there is a dichotomy between the attitudes in the developed and the developing countries. In the developing countries, digitization is seen as an unalloyed good, and I think rightly so. Those people have a lot more catching up to do, and they know that digital connectivity is going to help them and is helping them, and we should hope that they achieve that. I mean, I personally look at the big picture of the planet as a very, very big good news story. On reality, in every real, genuine macro measure, 2018 was the best year in human history for the human race. And the problem is that those benefits are not distributed equally, and they're sort of like they're coming up at our expense, speaking as a wealthy world person. And I don't really think that's so terrible objectively as a global thinker, but as an American, as a citizen of the country that elected Trump, etc., I can see the consequences of our failure to balance that out somehow, and our failure to even explain it to the citizens of our countries. People don't really see, you know, people don't, I am a globalist, I'm unashamedly. I think it's basically good if the people of Nigeria and Indonesia and South Africa and India are radically increasing their wealth and their health and their purchasing power, etc. Realistically, as that continues, it's very hard to see that we will continue to have the same relative advantages that we've had in the last 75 years. And ultimately, we've just got to get used to that, in effect.
Yeah.
Sure. David, what do you think has had the most impact in terms of the attitude or the mindset and the fact that the World Economic Forum has to remind us that it's not a zero-sum game? Was it the US presidential elections in the last 2 years, or the evidence that people have now recognized that the technology companies need to do a better job of protecting their data and privacy, and society as a whole has recognized that, wow, misuse of data could have profound impact on our lives? Which one do you think has had a more, created this sense of, I'll say, uneasiness in terms of the dialogue?
I think there's two different sources of uneasiness here. You know, the issue of jobs is quite distinct from the issue of data privacy and the consequences of a targeted advertising model, which is really, I think, the Facebook Google issue, and may eventually, in the not too distant future, become an Amazon issue also. I think ultimately that second part, the data issue, is much more an elite concern. And the ordinary citizens of the United States, France, etc., they really aren't thinking about that. They're thinking about the jobs piece and the immigration piece, which they tie together. I think those of us who are much more tied into what's really happening in tech can see that Facebook in particular has genuinely screwed up on its governance and is not showing any real signs of reforming that, even though they talk a good game, but the scope of the problem they face is so vast. My own view is that until they turn to the larger world for help, governments, civil society, other companies, in a collaborative method, as long as they keep saying, just trust us, we're good people, we can fix it, it's gonna get worse. So possibly those concerns about data will extend to broader parts of society if they don't get their act together.
Yeah, and part of that is that we have a vertically integrated data model here. If you go back to data as the new oil, the problem is upstream, midstream, downstream, all being vertically integrated by Facebook in the consumer world. But hey, David, we're almost out of time. I think you got to run. This is amazing. No, you're always here. Thank you so much for being out here.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, good luck in all your future success here. So.
Thank
Love
you.
this one too, by the way.
We could have talked to you for an entire hour. You were terrific. Thank you, sir.
On a regular show too. Hey, thanks a lot. All right, take care.
Sure.
Wow, we are alive here. We're going to have an awesome guest come in, but we can keep talking about all the trends that are happening at Davos. But our next guest is is a very, very special guy looking at some of the changes as we talk about reskilling, innovation, and some of the areas. Hop on out here. So
yeah, it's a pleasure for us to have Mike Morris. He's the CEO of Topcoder. Mike established Topcoder as a premier crowdsourcing software development destination. He believes that Topcoder's 1 million plus strong on-demand global software development community will continue to redefine business. And what a critically important time for us to have someone who's leading this incredible army of developers and design thinkers and creative folks helping companies transform. You can follow Topcoder on Twitter to get the latest news in terms of innovation in that space at Topcoder. Mike, would you share your Twitter handle with us as well before we start?
Sure, it's MP Morris 36.
MP Morris 36. Excellent. Welcome to DisrupTV, Mike.
Welcome to DisrupTV. It's awesome to have you here.
Great to be here.
So people are looking for innovation. They're looking for all these different places. But the challenge is, they don't always have the right people around. They don't have the right skill set. Sometimes they need outside ideas. And tell us the premise of why you actually set up Topcoder.
So, Bill Joy was one of the ones that really kind of founded the thinking around, no matter who you are as a company, the smartest people work for somebody else. And we firmly believe that. And Topcoder was a way to establish an environment and a network, and a community that allowed geography not to play, right? It didn't matter where you were. It didn't matter what your background was. If you were able to do a piece of work or accomplish a task, then you earned the right to do that work. And really, it's that democratization of opportunity. And we have amazing projects that we put out from the likes of companies like Comcast, Zurich Insurance, NASA, and we allow people all over the globe to be able to work on these projects and collaborate with each other to solve really complex or highly creative problems.
Now you use like a system of challenges, right? Like how does someone set up something? Like, I'm going to do a Topcoder challenge. Like how do they set it up? Like, what are some of the elements that are required to be successful?
So most people will first think that must mean that you have to have this incredibly specific specification. And it's actually quite the opposite. So what we do is we try to start with something that's broad brush, and a challenge really brings out creative ideas. So you can have a lot of difference of opinion, difference of thought, diversity of thought that comes in from a challenge, where you might get 12 people to submit the way that the application could flow or could work or could look, as opposed to one or two. So we use a challenge to really bring out the best in our community. When you do things like application development, we're using challenges more to identify the people with the right skill sets, and then we use them to do that hard engineering, that testing, and all the finished goods. And then finally, on our data science side, that's where competition is, in my opinion, is kind of the crown jewels of Topcoder, where people will compete, not just for the prize money, but they compete for the problems that we solve, predictive medicine problems, getting a mission to Mars problems. These things are huge, difficult, complicated, hairy, algorithmic problems, and people compete for the fun of that, or for the ability to see their names on leaderboards and get statistics and ratings for it.
Sure. Mike, we had the president of IDC on our show a couple of weeks ago, and he said that from 1965 to 2017, 500 million software applications were created. And IDC projects that only in the next 10 years, there'll be another 500 million applications, so doubling the total capacity in just the next decade. At the same time, demand for IT to develop applications is 5 times greater than their ability to produce, based on our latest research. So there's incredible demand. We don't have the skill set to deliver to those demand. It's launching this citizen development movement, but without necessarily the guidelines you need to ensure scalability and security. So tremendous opportunity for organizations like Topcoder to help companies accelerate their digital business transformation. My question to you is, given the fact that we know there's a skills gap shortage within companies, and those companies that don't leverage communities like Topcoder are sure to fall behind, how do you incentivize, or can you talk about, like, for example, I've heard a premier Topcoder has an automatic interview at some of the best tech companies in the world, Google's, the Apple's, the Salesforce's. So there's incentive for you to be part of this community because you have lifelong employability. At Davos, how are you encouraging the community to understand the benefits of partnering with Topcoder?
I think I actually would say your estimate might even be low. I believe so much in like the amount of technology that is going to be produced, and serverless computing and containerized computing and all these other things that combine together with exponential technologies like crowdsourcing are going to lead to an environment with AI where, with much less
physical code, you can create an application. I mean, I think order of magnitudes less, which is going to lead to more and more applications, more and more complexity, and more innovation. So to me, it's the companies that act as an exponential organization that are going to disrupt the ones that are not, that are going to pave the way. And it is true. Companies are seeing it. They realize that they are competing with Apple, with Google for the same exact talent, because Apple and Google will hire as much as they can get, right? Salesforce will hire as much as they can get. So they're really competing for that talent, that top-notch talent. And they're not going to be in the brands in retail and even financial services are going to have a hard time getting that, because the other movement that's happening at the exact same time is that people are realizing that the world really is flat. And when you have, when your skill is based in intellectual capital, that you can demand, a fair and equitable living by providing that intellectual capital, companies that will pay for it, regardless of where you are, right? The next generation is not going to, not even close, going to sit in cubes. They might do that as a social experiment or something fun, but it's not going to be to get work done. I already see that in we're a Wipro Company. And we operate 100% remotely. So my entire team in Topcoder works remote.
170,000 employees spread around the globe. That's amazing.
That's pretty well. So here at Davos, right, what are you looking for? What are you trying to talk to people about? What are people engaging you with? Some of the conversations that are hot. So the vibe that I hear a lot of is, disruption and transformation. There's just a heavy vibe towards that. And, I mean, probably a little bit too much. But the funny thing is that the themes of globalization are clearly underpinning everything. I think a lot of the gig economy theme is subdued, right? It's like, it's mentioned kind of as one of those things that's going to, be a big impact or be an issue. AI is, there's an amazing theme of, I think half the people here are positive on the effects of AI and what it's going to bring to us, and the other half are scared. The robots are going to kill us all. They call themselves the realists. I'm on the positive side, obviously. But I think that's really interesting. So those are the themes that I'm hearing. I think next year we're going to see a lot more about how globalization and the gig economy together are going to change the way companies operate, how countries look at talent, right? So if you think about it, a lot of the way that we're competing as an organization or even as a country is the talent that we're able to produce, attract, bring in. And I think that that's going to be a major theme that, I sense it, I hear it, a lot of people talk about it, but it's not one of the top 4 or 5 or maybe even 10 themes this year, but that's going to be another one. Wow. We're here with Mike Morris. We are here with Mike Morris, CEO of Topcoder at MMORRIS 36, is that correct? NPM RRIS 36. Yes. All right, we're live in Davos. Thank you very much. Thanks for dropping by. So, see you later. Wow, this is fast. We only got like 7 minutes left. 30 minutes.
All of these guests deserve more time, so I'm going to apologize on our behalf because these are big thinkers and they're doing big work. And but this is our speed DisrupTV version, and this is where we bring. This is my baseball analogy, although coming from Boston and what Patriots have just recently done, I should be using a football analogy. But this is our cleanup hitter spot. This is where we bring the last guest, and we expect he or she to hit a grand slam, and I'm sure that's going to be the case. Our final guest on our special edition from Davos is Gurvinder Singh Sahni, Chief Marketing Officer at Appirio and General Manager for Strategic Marketing Initiatives at Wipro. Gurvinder has led global head of analyst relations, account-based marketing, influencer marketing, geo-marketing at Wipro. He's a digital marketing thought leader, one of the most social CMOs you're gonna find on Twitter, and generally considered by many, including myself, as a top digital transformation executive thought leader that you wanna know and connect with. You can follow Gurvinder on Twitter at GSSAHNI. Welcome, Gurvinder, to DisrupTV.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks, Xavier.
I thought you're going to finish 5 minutes in the intro.
I'm sorry.
No, we have 2 minutes left. No, I'm kidding.
Gurvinder and I have been walking the streets of Davos, and we're trying to figure out what's going on, get a sense for what's happening. We've been into the different conversations, and a lot of what happens at Davos is not in the Congress Center. It's actually all the stuff that's happening on the streets, the conversations, all the sidebars, some of the hotels, some great conversations. A couple things that you thought were interesting this year.
I think I would correlate it to what we believe at Appirio. And I think we believe it's all about a different experience. And I see it happening here. For example, our thought is that your customers don't exist in silos, so why should your technology? And as I meet people, I'm kind of able to relate to that because I hear that talk as I walk and met a number of people, right? We met from chief executives to a lot of startups who are here talking about AI and experience. So that's been my experience so far.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is there's a lot of conversation about platforms, how these platforms are going to play, and then I think there's also a lot of conversations about how new technology is going to get adopted. And I think that's really been one of the things that people are trying to figure out how to work around. So,
one of the things that's well known about Appirio is that very technically astute service provider and technology company. My experience with Appirio has been that often you're engaged with businesses on not just modernizing existing legacy processes, but rather coming up with new sources of revenue, new business model innovation. And in order to do that, you have to have the business acumen, the technology, the design capabilities, and also macro, micro market understanding. Gurvinder, how much discussion at Davos is centered around new business models in order to have sustainable growth and frankly relevance versus just using technology in combination to simply modernize legacy processes?
So, it's an interesting question because I think this is our 3rd year together and the 6th year for me. And I think this year I can see a lot of relevant discussion, especially from a sustainability perspective, because I think the customers are actually putting pressure back on business and they have to answer to that. So I think this is, we moved way ahead in comparison to how I used to see, let's say 4 or 5 years ago. So I see a big change. And coming to Appirio, I think we have a big focus in terms of customer satisfaction, right? So we have a 71% higher NPS than industry average. And in terms of how it relates to project timelines, so we have an 83% shorter project timeline if you look at the industry average. So there's a clear focus on those two aspects from an Appirio perspective. And we completed about 2 years of acquisition as when we acquired Appirio, and I think it's opened up a whole new avenue in terms of multiple industries and looking at our customers. And with my experience from an account-based marketing perspective, I think we look at a very bright future from an Appirio perspective. And we met at Dreamforce as well, right? Appirio creates an amazing experience, whether it's an event or whether it's in a live customer scenario.
It's all about the black card, guys. Appirio black card.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm hoping that I can, qualify for that distinction someday. So Gurvinder, you have a tough job in an era of globalization 4.0, where there's clearly in the last 2 years a deficit in trust, especially in the tech sector.
Right.
You recognize, and you've recognized this for as many years as I've known you, that your culture is your brand.
Absolutely.
How companies and employees and business partners and your communities perceive your brand or perceive your culture is the same in terms of, it correlates directly to how much they trust your products, your services, your company as a whole. Now, how, as a newly promoted, and congratulations, CMO of Appirio, working in a company as large as Wipro, what are you doing to bring those ethos or those core values that you've maintained since I've known you, to create that culture of inclusiveness, empathy, trust, collaboration, and really co-creation of value, which again, Appirio has been known to do for many years?
I think action speaks louder than words, and it's interesting that the founder of Appirio, Chris Barbin, is actually the head of our culture organization. We call it as Culture Works, which is actually working towards how do we look at culture hacks. Like we heard at Gartner Symposium earlier, where they spoke about how critical culture hacks are. So that's actually a team, and it's very close to Appirio because their founder is actually implementing that. And I think from that perspective, it's a big step that we took from Wipro and Appirio. And we're also focusing a lot on localization. So I don't know if you saw the latest numbers in our quarterly results. We are about 62% plus local in a geography like United States, which is so critical for us. So I think those are the two things that I can quote in terms of action being louder than words.
Wow, we're here with Gurvinder Singh. This has been awesome. Thank you for being here. Thanks for having a takeout.
Thanks.
We'll catch up in a little bit. Thanks a lot.
Bye from Davos.
Bye from Davos. So,
I tell you, Gurvinder is incredible digital marketeer. I always learn from him, and I'm happy that he was on our first show from Davos.
this is very, very good. So yeah, so we're going to do some more live broadcasting from Davos. We get some interesting folks. We're going to get a scene for the Chinese VC scene tomorrow, and a couple other surprise guests. We are pulling folks. I think we might have the CMO of SAP Ariba, Tiffin. I think she's going to be on. So we'll see what's going on, but we've got piling guests. These are kind of random. Also an event report you can check to see what's going on. Our view from what's happening at Davos. That just got published. You can check it out on the Constellation website. We're talking about the fact that the globalization 4.0 is under fire as global leaders fail the populace. We're talking about the trends that are creating schisms around the world, but more importantly, what we can do about it. So you can read a little bit about that on the Constellation website. Other than that, yeah, thanks for joining us for the special edition of Disrupt TV at Davos. Any last words on your end?
You know, I love the photos that you've been sharing. Please keep sharing photos. I'm living vicariously through you by just following your stream. Please follow RWANG0. Ray has been incredibly generous with his observations, live streams, not just videos, so you get to see panels and keynotes, and it's like you have a front row seat addition to World Economic Forum Davos 2019. Please.
And a note from a producer, Aubrey, catch us at 7:30 a.m. Pacific and 10:30 a.m. Eastern tomorrow as well.
Terrific. Nice talking to you, Ray. We'll get you tomorrow, and enjoy, stay warm and enjoy World Economic Forum Davos 2019. We'll see you tomorrow at 10:30 Eastern Standard, 7:30 Pacific. See you, everyone.
Hey, bye, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Bye.